Tonight on Talking Points, the Bidens host the Macrons. We break down what took place during the Commander-in-Chief's first state dinner and what the two presidents chatted about.
Plus, strike averted, but tensions among American railroad workers remain high. We have the details on the bipartisan legislation and what it means nationally.
And the battle between Disney and DeSantis continues, what the two sides are bickering over, and what's at stake for the company's popular vacation spot. Talking Points starts right now. President Biden and French President Emmanuel Macron affirmed their commitment to supporting Ukraine. Hey, welcome into Talking Points. I'm Chile Cassia-Dele.
And I'm Tegan Brown. The visit is the first time the two have spoken publicly together since the U.S. stopped a nuclear deal between France and Australia last summer.
Talking Points analyst Jake Morrell joins us in studio to give us the details behind what was discussed between the two world leaders. Jake, what were the key discussion points between the two presidents?
Chile, Tegan, Macron came to the White House with a clear agenda, and from Ukraine to electric vehicles, the French president looked to represent the rest of Europe with questions for Biden. And I'll start with what they agreed on. Both presidents said that Putin needs to continue to be pushed back, and Biden promised that the U.S. would continue to assist the French with getting away from using Russian natural gas. But the two leaders separated when asked about directly contacting Putin. Biden still saying he has no intentions of contacting the Russian president, while Macron said that he would in the coming days. And speaking of these disagreements, the two discussed the Inflation Reduction Act, which received heavy criticism from European leaders when it was signed in August. Now, Biden promised to be more inclusive with the historic $369 billion package as time goes on, saying that some tweaks could be made, which is seen as a big win for European leaders.
That Inflation Reduction Act, how exactly did President Biden respond to President Macron speaking out against what, the American president considers to be such a win?
Well, Tegan, like I said, Biden faced heavy criticism from several European leaders, including Macron, when he signed the Inflation Reduction Act. Macron claimed that Biden was potentially illegally averting business away from Europe, especially electric vehicle business from car exporting nations like France itself and Germany. But part of the legislation aimed to create American jobs with EV manufacturing by making it so the U.S. would only buy North American electric vehicles. And when Biden was asked about the legislation at a joint press conference with Macron, he did not apologize.
Look. The United States makes no apology, and I make no apology since I wrote it for the legislation you're talking about.
Now, despite Biden's comments here, he did say that he would promise to, quote, resynchronize his approach to the electric vehicle subsidies.
And Jake, this is another major meeting for the president. What does this conversation mean for the future of Biden's foreign policy?
Well, Chile, I think this meeting has the potential to help or hurt Biden's overall approval rating, not just from foreign countries, but also from voters here at home. The fact that the IRA looks to keep jobs in the U.S. and move EV production here is appealing to his constituency, but it does anger some of our allies. And I think if Biden were to change that, or at least ease it, he could make some headway with European nations while still taking a win at home with the IRA as a whole. After all, France is our oldest ally and one that Biden is looking to keep around.
Jake Morrell, thank you so much. And new details tonight on the war between Russia and Ukraine. Explosions rocked two military air bases in Russia earlier today. Russia says explosions killed 3 military personnel as well.
The Russian Defense Ministry says the explosions were from Ukraine and hit Russia hundreds of miles away from the border. These explosions signaling a new ability from Ukraine by attacking Russia deep into its mainland. It's been over 9 months now since Russia invaded Ukraine in late February.
And the midterm races are almost over, and all eyes are now being shifted toward the 2024 presidential election cycle. The Democratic primaries are in the process of making a historical shift by changing the order in which the primaries are held. Talking Points analyst Adriana Hydarvin now joins us to tell us the order in which the Democratic primaries could be held in a little bit more than a year. So Adriana, What are the new order of these Democratic primaries looking like? That is, if Biden's proposal succeeds.
South Carolina will be at the forefront of the event, followed by Nevada, New Hampshire, Georgia, as well as Michigan. It is important to note this is quite a historical event, as candidates will now be able to focus on more diverse groups, whereas Iowa used to be more white-centered, which was quite limiting in that regard.
So, you're saying this is a historical event, but what exactly is the strategy for Democrats by reordering the presidential primaries? What are they gaining?
With these new incoming changes, we can see how now they'll be targeting more diverse groups, which have the ability to open doors to more a wider range of candidates. And as South Carolina is going to be at the forefront of the event, we can see how these candidates will now have to find ways to bond to and relate with Black voters, which are in populous cities like Detroit, Michigan, as well as some parts in Georgia, as well as South Carolina.
And now, Adriana, this isn't the first, decision or proposal by Biden causing divisions within his own party. So what exactly is the status of all of these internal arguments and disagreements and discussions going on among the Democratic Party?
Biden's plan did come as a shock to many Democrats because in reality, Democrats do not have the power to change and move these primaries dates. And even a couple hours ago, senators in New Hampshire decided to skip on the White House congressional ball that is happening tonight. And I think it's a very accurate depiction of the tensions that are currently still within the Democratic Party.
Adriana Hydarva, thank you so much, and I'll toss it over to Chalet.
Tegan, thank you. This year's midterms will officially wrap up following Georgia's Senate runoff tomorrow. Peach State voters deciding whether Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock will be elected to his first full term in office, or if challenger Herschel Walker will become the first GOP senator in Georgia since former Senator David Perdue. Our Noah Gutfleisch is in to break down the latest in the polls. So, Noah, where do polls stand as we head towards this runoff day?
Well, we have seen that the polls released since the general election have tended to favor Warnock. He has only lost one poll from Phillips Academy, which is a high school, maybe the most reputable source. It's not great on 538. But besides that, he has led a narrow margin in most polls. He has led by 3% in Survey USA. He has led by 2 in Emerson, and he has led by 3 in Insider Advantage, which actually had him down during the general election. So the numbers are looking fairly good for Warnock, but it's a small lead, and that could possibly mean that it is not a guarantee for him.
And Georgia is one of those states now where we can't just talk about the election day total. Early voting becoming a big part of the story as well. What do we know about how many people have voted so far in this runoff election before voters tomorrow head to the polls that have it?
Well, turnout from in the early vote is down from the general election, about 26%. Besides that, though, the electorate is a bit older, but also it is more diverse. The white vote went down from 61% to 55%, and the black vote has gone up along with the Asian and Hispanic and Latino vote. So the electorate is more diverse, and that should theoretically advantage Warnock in this situation.
And that's a trend we've been watching. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago. The amount of people going out, what kind of people, what races, ethnicities of people are showing up as well. But to talk and wrap up here, what have the campaigns really focused on in these past few weeks? This was one of the more highly contested races going into November. A lot of issues at play, whether it be abortion, whether it be a slew of other things. What have the campaigns focused on?
Well, Walker has not shied away from his support of former President Trump. He has also taken many issues in the culture war. One of the few ads he released had a former competitor of swimmer Leah Thomas, who has come under criticism because she is a trans woman, and many people have opposed her because of her role because she is in women's sports. So he's been focused on the culture war. He's also been talking about guns. Meanwhile, Warnock has mostly focused on social issues and local issues.
It's election night in Georgia. We'll be watching it for sure as it comes. Noah Gutfleisch, thank you. Next on the show, rail workers' strike averted once again. What you need to know about the agreement reached when we come back.
Fancy pants peanut butter?
A big screen television.
You haven't even bought a sofa yet.
A motorcycle? When your father finds out, he's gonna flip his shoes with 2 buckles? What do you even need 2 buckles for? Mr. Big Shot, buying whiskey shots for everybody in the bar. From the looks of it, I'd say nobody even remembers.
Feed the pig.
Hey, welcome back to Talking Points. President Biden signed legislation last week to prevent a rail worker strike across the nation.
Now, a strike of this caliber would disrupt the transport of essential supplies around the country, like food and water. Talking Points analyst Harrison Calder now joins us to discuss the impact of the bill being signed. Now, Harrison, what are the major components of this bill?
So there's a lot. So President Biden signed this. It was a labor agreement between freight rail carriers and unionized workers that he backed all the way in September. It was a huge problem because of the economy. The bill went 80-15 in favor of averting it. The reasonings for that were because $2 billion a day would be lost for the economy. 7,000 trains would be kept off the rails. That's 40% of the U.S. travel, so that would cause a lot of issues.
And, you know, we've seen this issue kind of spring up a couple times over the past few months. You know, why did this threat of a strike really exist in the first place?
It existed a lot because of paid sick leave and just these workers wanting to be able to make more money on the regular. Of course, the economy with the pandemic taking a huge hit has caused a lot of problems for them not getting the money they deserve with all their hard work. So that was a huge thing. And of course, with sick leave, the voting was 52-43. So they were able to get the majority, but not enough in the Senate to pass it. So they made progress, but not enough.
And Harrison, you mentioned that majority, 80 yays, 15 nays. Why exactly did those 15 senators vote no?
So we got some no's from both sides, and it was because of two different perspectives. The Democrats believed that they needed the full deal, which included the sick paid leave and some other issues along with the deal. Some of the Republicans, including Ted Cruz and many others, they wanted to keep the spending down. They didn't believe that this was the right way to go about it. But most were willing to get around it, figuring out the issues, and so we got the bill averted. Or excuse me, the strike averted, and so 24% raises over 5 years will be coming for these unionized workers with only 1 day of paid leave. So they made progress.
Harrison Calder, thank you so much. Earlier this week, the Senate passed the Respect for Marriage Act. This bill now grants protections for millions of same-sex and interracial marriages in the United States. Jacob Goldberg tells us more about the bill and its future.
On Tuesday, the Senate passed legislation to protect same-sex and interracial marriage. The bill, titled the Respect for Marriage Act, will now require all states to legalize these marriages and also requires them to acknowledge marriages from other states. The Senate passed the bill with an overwhelming 61-36 majority. The bill was supported by all members of the Democratic Party and 12 Republicans. After the Senate's approval, the bill will be heading to the House, who will need to approve the legislation before sending it to President Biden. With a Democratic majority, the House is expected to pass the bill before the end of the calendar year and could pass it as soon as the next few days. President Biden has hailed this as a, quote, bipartisan achievement for the Senate and believes for millions of Americans this legislation will safeguard the rights and protections to which LGBTQI and interracial couples and their children are entitled. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer also chimed in on the importance of the bill and its protections of many Americans.
To the rest of my colleagues, and to all Americans who are watching what the Senate does, this is a great chance to do something very important for tens of millions of Americans. No one in a same-sex marriage should have to worry about whether or not their marriage will be invalidated in the future.
Although the bill does not have the same protections as Obergefell v. Hodges, which was passed in 2015, it still requires states to recognize these marriages, regardless of potential changes from the Supreme Court in the future.
Jacob Goldberg, thank you so much. And next up on Talking Points, the Walt Disney Company and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis are at odds once again. We'll tell you why when we return in 90 seconds.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for information on how to provide even better care for the person who wants to care of you.
Welcome to my house. Lately, not my happy place. Everybody's pretty tired of each other. The parents were not themselves. My little brothers were morphing into small creatures. The walls were closing in. Clearly, a case of too much family, too close, 24/7. And there's a lot of that going around right now. If this sounds like your house, try going someplace new. YourLifeYourVoice.org. You'll find lots of ideas to help you handle the family stresses of being confined to close quarters. YourLifeYourVoice.org. It might not get you out of the house, but it could help you find a little more breathing room.
Welcome back to Talking Points. Earlier this year, the head of Disney waded into political waters and put the business at odds with a possible candidate for president.
Now that CEO Bob Chapek has been replaced with former CEO Bob Iger, Iger has made a promise to stay out of politics. Talking Points analyst Luke Radel is here to talk about the politics behind this corporate shakeup. Luke?
Thank you, Tegan and Chile. For nearly a century, the Walt Disney Company has been taking us into the world of fantasy and stayed out of the world of politics. But that's changed in recent months, with many conservatives attacking the entertainment juggernaut. Chief among them is Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who's been seen as a strong option for the GOP in the 2024 presidential race. It all started back in May when Governor DeSantis supported controversial legislation that some activists have dubbed the Don't Say Gay bill. Now, the bill, which is actually titled the Parental Rights in Education Act, includes a provision that says, quote, classroom instruction on sexual orientation or gender identity may not occur in kindergarten through grade 3. Now, activists say this law could put LGBTQ plus youth in harm's way and push the Walt Disney Company to publicly condemn the new law. Disney is the largest employer in the Sunshine State, thanks to their massive theme park and shopping complex in Orlando. Now, Bob Chapek, who was Disney's CEO at the time, caved to activist pressure and spoke out strongly against the legislation. He even called Governor DeSantis in an effort to prevent the bill's passage. But Chapek's efforts didn't do much. A spokesperson for DeSantis released a statement saying, quote, the call did not change the governor's position, and in fact, the governor encouraged Mr. Chapek to read the bill, adding that such discussions need to be based on the text of the bill, not a fabricated narrative. Not only did the bill ultimately become law over Disney's objections, but Governor DeSantis retaliated against the company for their foray into politics, creating serious financial headaches for the Disney board in recent months. It's possible that Chapek's tussle with the Florida governor may have factored into the surprising announcement late last month that he'd been fired and his predecessor Robert Iger would be returning to run the company once again. Iger appears to have taken the hint and is moving in a different direction. In Iger's first company-wide town hall since his return, he told employees that Disney getting into politics, quote, can be distracting and have a negative impact on the company, saying that, quote, to the extent that I can quiet things down, I'm going to do that. So it seems like in the battle between Disney and DeSantis, Republicans will see these latest corporate changes in leadership at the Mouse House as a decisive win for the Florida governor in his ongoing conservative crusade on largely social issues. Chile and Tegan, back to you guys.
Luke Radel, thank you so much. Now, with Republicans taking the House during the 2022 midterms, it's unclear what the future of both the GOP and Democratic leadership will look like.
Talking Points analyst Peter Barry joins us now to give a picture of what leadership in the 118th Congress may look like. Peter.
Thank you, Chilean Tegan. When the U.S. House of Representatives reconvenes next month, there will be a new Speaker of the House and a new House Minority Leader. The reason is that the Republicans won a majority of the nation's 435 House seats in the last month's election. The GOP has control of the 222 seats, while the Democrats hold 213 seats in the 118th Congress. California Congressman Kevin McCarthy, who is currently the House Minority Leader, is favored to become the next Speaker of the House. Yet there are some Republicans holding out on the voting for McCarthy for the Speaker of the House because they do not believe he is the right person for the job. In the end, many people are expecting Leader McCarthy to win the support of enough Republican colleagues to secure the Speaker's position. Just 2 weeks ago, Speaker Pelosi said she would remain in Congress but plans to step down as leader within the Democratic Party. A few days ago, the Democrats in the House elected Congressman Hakeem Jeffries of New York to be the House Minority Leader starting in January. Congressman Jeffries, who represents a district in Brooklyn, is going to become the first black man to hold a top leadership position in either the House or the Senate. If the Democrats were to win back the majority in the U.S. House in 2024, Minority Leader Jeffries would likely become the Speaker of the House. Jeffries.
Peter Barry, thank you. Coming up on Talking Points, sudden growth. The U.S. economy making some recent gains. More on the reasons behind the bounce back when we come back.
You drive buzzed. It could be one very expensive ride.
First, you gotta make bail. Then pay me to get your car back.
Your insurance premiums will go through the roof.
And my legal fees just keep adding up. All told, it could end up costing you $10,000.
Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Welcome back to Talking Points. Many economic experts predicted the United States would fall into a recession during the third quarter. However, the economy saw a sudden rise and was up almost 3% during that period.
Talking Points analyst Jake Morrell joins us once again to discuss what was behind the bounce back. So, Jake, you know, one of the things we've been seeing, the GDP rising nearly 3%. Can you break down what's behind that?
Yeah, Chilean Tegan, thanks for having me back on. Let's take a look at the numbers here. If we go back to 2021, we have quarter two and quarter four seeing big jumps, 7% growth in GDP. Now, that was right when we started to peel back a lot of COVID regulations, a lot of businesses going back to where they were before the pandemic. But once we hit 2022, we saw record high inflation, record high gas prices. We were not doing great in 2022. In quarter one and quarter two, you could see negative GDP there, over 2% in the first quarter. But as we see right here in the third third quarter of 2022, a little bit of a surprise because of that inflation and because of those gas prices. We've seen GDP rise almost 3%, 2.9 to be exact in the report that came out last Wednesday. Now, like I said, that may come as a surprise, but if we take a look at factors that affect GDP the most, it's not as much. We have a narrowing trade deficit, which means Americans are buying more American goods and less imports, which means we are boosting the economy from the bottom up. As I talked about earlier with the IRA, Biden promoting buying American. That's one of the things. Number two, consumer spending. People starting to become more comfortable with their wallets after the pandemic, almost 2 years removed now, and we're hitting earnings season in November and December right now. Three, lowering unemployment. We've seen unemployment start to go farther down and down as we've gone throughout 2022. More jobs, that's helping the economy. And number four, corporations investing. We have a great example right here in central New York with Micron announcing that they're going to build a huge plant in the town of Clay. Those four things definitely contributing to the rise in GDP, guys.
And now something on here that you mentioned, this consumer spending, this idea of Biden wanting American-made products bought by Americans. We have 260,000 new jobs. These are people buying those products. How exactly have the jobs and the buying contributed to this change in the economy?
Well, Tegan, like I said, those jobs being created here, that's because people are buying more American goods. So companies are becoming richer and richer since the pandemic. And since they're becoming richer and they've got that more money, they can hire more people, and more people are out looking for jobs. We saw record high unemployment during 2021, during the pandemic. And now that we're coming back and people are starting to make more money, people are starting to get off stimulus, people are taking more of these jobs.
And Jake, we talk about moving forward with the jobs and talking about corporations investing. So what do companies need to do? What does the economy look like, should I say, going forward based off of what we've seen? Does this increase in domestic jobs have to do with a possible economic increase, decrease? What are you seeing? What would you predict?
Now, Chile, like I said, what we're seeing right now is we've seen this year, especially with the Inflation Reduction Act and with several other pieces of legislation, we're seeing people being encouraged to buy American and those American companies becoming richer. And as we saw that in the third quarter, we see this growth right here. GDP is a great indicator of economic success. So like I said, if we continue to see these four things increasing, especially narrowing trade deficit, like you said, people buying American goods is increasing American jobs. And we're seeing that in multiple different industries, including healthcare, which is one that we can go into a little bit more later. But like I said, if we see these things continue to increase, that only means good things for the economy.
So I actually want to go a little bit into healthcare. I mean, we saw during the pandemic this rise in demand for healthcare jobs. What exactly have we seen, and how has that contributed to this growth in the economy that we're seeing?
Now, Tegan, healthcare is the number one industry that has increased jobs the most in the most recent job report that came out on Friday. And that's because so many people quit their healthcare jobs during the pandemic. And seeing that, a lot of people who didn't have jobs went and got those degrees from 2-year programs, from 1-year programs. And now that's in such a demand because so many people quit, and we're still dealing with the effects of the pandemic in hospitals, in healthcare providers, and we're seeing people be hired because there's such a demand for it. And that was created not only by the pandemic, but also within the pandemic, so many people quitting their jobs. We need those healthcare workers, and people are getting hired.
Yeah, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics saying 45,000 jobs added in healthcare this year.
Yeah, and Jake, hearkening back to that idea of jobs being gained over the course of time, I think talking about this domestic production, we saw it really be a buzzword in 2016, before talking about bringing jobs back to the United States. And it seems like COVID, just like it was in terms of healthcare as well, maybe it's a turning point for that kind of ideology as well.
Yeah, Chile, I think it could be a turning point because, again, going back to the Inflation Reduction Act, one thing that the Biden administration is trying to focus on is clean energy jobs to get ahead of those competitors like China, like Saudi Arabia, like countries in the Middle East. So as we see those increase, we'll see the economy increase as well.
Well, Jake Morrell, thank you so much. And that is the end of our semester of Talking Points. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Tegan Brown.
And I'm Chile Cassiadelli. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at CitrusTV News.
Thank you so much to our producers and to our current news director and our previous news director. We are so grateful for everything you've done for the show, as well as all of our analysts.
Yep. Well, we'll be back in January. Until then, have a great night, Syracuse.